Welcome to yet another edition of Chazaq's Tuesday's Timely Torah Talks, the very popular interviews on various Torah topics with very influential and amazing rabbis and speakers. Tonight we have with us Rabbi Boruch Goldstein. Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Goldstein. How are you doing?
Shalom Aleichem. How are you, Rabbi Yaakov? How are you, Rabbi? What a tremendous chus and what a great honor to be part of one of the most wonderful organizations that spreads Torah worldwide across the globe, and it's a tremendous chus. Thank you for having me.
And of course, it's our honor. And tonight's topic is seeing the light in the darkness. But before we delve into tonight's exciting topic, Rabbi Goldstein, can you give our audience a little bit of a background about yourself and the great work that you're involved with?
Yes, absolutely. So Baruch Hashem, I'm currently the Rav at Kahal Ner Lameya. We're a Kehila on Nostrand Avenue between Kings Highway and Avenue P. And Baruch Hashem, it's a tremendous chus to be able to be a Rav of such a beautiful and warm and loving Kehila. There are many professionals, which at the same time are tremendous Talmidei Chachamim, people that have tremendous she'ifa and aspirations for Avodas Hashem. And Baruch Hashem, it's such a schus, to be able to be part of such a beautiful Kehila where our davening is so outstanding. I could say that Baruch Hashem, we're Zeicha, that, we're Makayim, the words of the Shulchan Aruch that says, Asla daber b'shas hatfilah. And it's a tremendous experience and a great schus to be part of such a beautiful shul.
Amazing. Ner Lameya Chazaq has had the schus, the merit to organize quite a few events and lectures at the Rav Shul, and we're always excited to spread Torah everywhere and anywhere.
Yes, it's incredible work. It's incredible. I mean, over the years that we worked together, the different shiurim, whether it was Tisha B'Av or the legal holidays, and it's really, the organization Chazaq, it's a conduit to really spread Torah to the masses.
Baruch Hashem, Chazei Hashem. So Rabbi Goldstein, let's jump into it. As we said, tonight's topic is seeing the light in the darkness. As we all know, we just entered the cold winter months where there's a tendency to, unfortunately, for certain people to get down or to be sad, in a sad mood because it's cold outside and the darkness starts earlier. Maybe the rabbi can elaborate on this phenomenon and what are two ways to address it. We all know we just had Hanukkah also, and we light up the night whenever it's night, whenever it's that's when we're supposed to light the menorah.
Yes, 100%. You're right. In the summer, you see the beautiful bright sun. People are going around, they're traveling. You just walk outside and the weather, it lifts up a person's spirit.
Right.
But then it comes to the dark nights of the winter, in a way, a person could get down. It's raining outside, it's cold, it's snowing. But the truth is that if you look through the prisms of Torah, if you look through the lens of Hashkavas HaTorah, the Gemara in Masechtas Eruvin and Daf Samachay tells us, where the Gemara has a dialogue with different opinions of Mandiyamrim between the rabbis, what were the nights created for? One rabbi is of the opinion the night's created to go to sleep. Try to spend your time awake during the daytime. It lifts up a person, exactly what you're saying. But it's interesting that Reb Shimon ben Lakish, who spent the earlier years of his life, touring the streets, he was the head of the bandits, and, he's part of the gang, and he experienced traveling all over. And Reb Shimon ben Lakish writes that Lo Ibri Sahari, the night was not created, Elo Legirsa. The night was created to be able to have time. Person's not as busy during the days at work. He has the nights, in a sense, it's viewed as a gift, as a matana, really an opportunity and a present from the Ribono Shel Olam that a person has longer nights where he's not so busy that he's able to spend on learning Torah. You look through the prisms of the way Hashkavas HaTorah viewed it. It wasn't a time to get down. To the contrary, it was a time to be uplifted. We all celebrate Tu B'Av. It's a great yontif. We're all familiar, especially those who are learning the daf. They're going to come to it shortly about the great yontif of Tu B'Av, which is more famously, that's the time that there were many shidduchim that transpired, that took place. The boys would go out, the girls would go out. There were many shidduchim that took place in Klal Yisrael, a tremendous simcha. But the Gemara offers another interpretation on what the great celebration of Tu B'Av was. And the Gemara writes that the celebration of Tu B'Av, according to one opinion, is that now is the time after the summer solstice, where the nights get longer. December 21st, you have the winters, you have longer nights. That activated a special simcha, a happiness of peace of mind, of serenity, of tranquility, where a person sees, I have a whole night in front of me, I could use the time now to serve the Ribono Shel Olam. That was the great simcha of Tu B'Av. You should know, it's very interesting. Rabbi Yaakov, you're really going to appreciate this. Rabbi, you have to hear this. We know that I learned by Rabbi Yurikansky, Sheikh Tzaddik V'Kadosh Avrachi. He was a Rebbe in the Miri Yeshiva, and he was 97 for 30 years. Anyone who came to his shed, they would say, oh, he's in his high 90s. For decades. Rabbi Yurikansky was a Talmud by Rabbi Chanan Wasserman. And Rabbi Yurikansky, every single year on Purim, he would tell us over the story that in the time of the Chafetz Chaim, there was a dibuk. And he would say over the story what happened during the times of the dibuk by the Chafetz Chaim. And they asked the dibuk, they asked him the question that in what merit is the holy Chafetz Chaim, is he held in such high regard in Shemayim? So you would think they would answer because he penned his magnum opus, the Mishnah Berurah, maybe perhaps a Sefer on Shmiras Haloshen. Do you know what the dibuk answered? The dibuk answered, you know why the Chafetz Chaim is held on such a high pedestal? It's because of his Hasmadas HaTorah. He uses his time, he cherishes his time to use it in the proper fashion. That was the godless that they praise for the Chafetz Chaim. So you say, okay, but how do we address this? How do we address this to the simple person? There is no simple yid. Every pashat the yid is a heilige yid. But how do we address it? How do we address it and implement it in our lives? What can we walk away with it? Like you mentioned that we just left the Yontif of Chanukah. I want to share with you a profound thought from the Beis Yisrael. The Beis Yisrael is a Gavaldiga Kasha. He says, the Gemara tells us that the whole holiday and the celebration of Chanukah was due to the fact that they found one flask of oil. And this flask of oil that was supposed to last one night ended up lasting for 8 nights. And therefore we make a great celebration. B'halal, b'idov, b'alanisim. So the Beis Yisrael asks, he doesn't understand. The Gemara in Shabbos Chaf Aleph tells us that towards the end of the era of Shimon HaTzadik, which was about roughly maybe 2 generations before the miracle of Chanukah, the Gemara says that every single day there was a nace which took place with the menorah. They would use a chatzi lug of shemen, which had in it enough oil to burn. They would ignite it at night and had enough oil in it that in the morning it would go out. And yet says the Gemara that there's a daily miracle that the Western lamp, even though the other lamps went out in the morning, but there was a miracle with the Western lamp that its oil burnt until the next night, until the following night. So the Beis Yisrael is, I witnessed this miracle day in, day out. So why is it that we make such a celebration for Chanukah? The Beis Yisrael says an incredible thing. He says, you know why? He says, because during that kufa, the whole Hanhaga, the way the Ribbon Shalom governed us, and he conducted his Hanhaga with Klal Yisrael, everything was ba'ifin neis. Klal Yisrael was living in the full glory. They were being Shemet Torah mitzvahs. You saw such steadfast emunah. You saw what it means to live a life of Yerushalayim, of Ehrlichkeit. So the whole way that Ribbon Shalom conducted his Hanhaga with us, and he governed us, was ba'ifin nisi, was in a way of miracles. So there says the Beis Yisrael, okay, see, we saw another miracle, so we witnessed another nace. But that's not such a great thing, because the whole Hanhaga was ba'ifin nace. But when it came to the era of Chanukah, where unfortunately we know the majority of the Jews, they became Misyavnim, they got mixed into the Hellenistic culture, to the Greek lifestyle, they were influenced, and the majority of Yidden, they weren't Shemet Torah mitzvahs. But yet there was a small group, the Chashmonaim, who we saw such devotion and tremendous Mesiris Nefesh. And amidst such darkness, amidst such chayshach, Ribbon Shalom went ahead and performed a miracle and showed these Yidden, this small group of Yidden, that I will never abandon you. You're not forlorn. You're not lost. I'm with you side by side, every step of the way, every action that you do. It means so much to me. Says the Beis Yisrael, when Ribbon Shalom makes a nace, when there's so much chayshach, when there's so much darkness, that's already a great celebration. You should know Rabbi Elazar Torik. He's a legendary Maggid. He's a Shishiva, an illustrious Gadol. So he has the yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. He gives share to the Bachrim, and he learned in the Panovich yeshiva. So he was relaying over his story that he remembers that when he was learning by Rabbi Shmuel Rozovsky in the Panovich yeshiva, so all the Bachrim, all the students knew that if you can ask a question and share, you have to make sure it's a good question, because if it's not, Rabbi Shmuel Rozovsky would let you know about it. He would tell you, why don't you think before you ask? The Amoldik European Lithuanian Rosh Hashivas, it's not like today. They said what had to be said. He was in Shia one time, And one of the boys asked a question. Shmuel Rozovsky stopped the share. He thought for a moment, and he told his boy, he says, you should know, you're asking a great kasha, gewaldige kasha. He thought for another moment, and he told him a great teretz. So Belazar Torah that was in the class, when he's writing down the notes, he wrote down this boy's question, and he wrote down the Rosh Hashiva's answer. Decades later, this fellow who asked the question, he ended up going into business, he went out to work, he had his family, and he meets him decades later. And Belazar Torah tells this person, you should know, I'm saying share now in yeshiva, we're learning Masechtas Bava Metzia. And I was going over my notes, and I told all the students in the yeshiva, I told them over your question, and I told them what Rabbi Shmuel Rozovsky answered. And they parted, they wished each other goodbye, and they left. A year or two later, they meet again in Rechoy Itzkevitz, they meet again, and this person comes over to Belazar Torah, and he thanks him, he embraces him, he hugs him, he tells him, you should know you saved my life. Belazar Torah asks him, what do you mean, how did I save your life? He says, I'll tell you, listen, I got so involved in the business world, and as we know of it today, I became so immersed in business that unfortunately the only learning I did was Shabbos morning Kriyas Torah. That's how I was yotze my learning for the week. But then when you came over to me at that moment and you told me that you're saying over my Torah, there are people in Klal Yisrael that are saying over my Torah, how could I not apply myself more? And right when we left and we parted, I went to the Svarim store and I bought myself a Gemara Bava Metzia, and I made the resolve that I'm not going to start my day or finish my day without spending some time learning the holy words of the Torah Kedosha. And from that, it led to more. Anytime I have time during the day, I pull out my Gemara Bava Metzia. And you should know, when I was elevated, my wife was elevated, my children became better, the whole atmosphere, the whole environment of my entire home became so different. And that's why I want to thank you for what you did for me. Every single one of us has a small flask of oil. Every neshama is blessed with his mission statement, with his unique mission, with his task that he's placed onto this world that nobody else could accomplish. And although we're amidst the choshech, there's such darkness, the influence, the environment of the outside world that tries daily to infiltrate into our lives, to try to minimize the kedusha of a yid. But every single yid has his flask of oil, whether it's a person who's able to apply himself to Torah, whether he's able to apply himself to chesed, or whatever it may be. Rebbeinu Shalom says, when you leave the Yontiv of Hanukkah, just ignite that small flask. And you'll see, if you do that one action and you light your flask of oil, it's not only going to last for 8 days, but it's going to change your entire life, and it's going to last for all eternity. And the same way that person, he had that pach, he built in that small flask of oil that he was able to gain in yeshiva. It was ignited by a compliment, by making the resolve, and his whole entire life, himself, his offspring, his descendants, everything's going to change. And that's how we have to leave Hanukkah. And the way to address it is that every individual and every person has to realize that he's given a God-given talent, a flask of shemen, a flask of oil, that's his unique shemen. And a person honestly knows what his koiches are, what his talents are. And if he ignites that flask, the Rebbeinu Shalom will take that small pach, and he'll see that also his life will change. And that's really what it's all about, because when a person applies himself to spiritual matters in the pursuit of ruchnius, he'll have more of an elevated life, and he'll be able to attach himself. Like the question you're asking, how to address it, the true answer is that for each person that knows his talent, and every person has a milah, he has to ignite that flask, and he'll see his winters will start to shine. They'll start to become brighter. He'll be a happier person. He'll be more fulfilled, and he'll be able to turn his winters, and he'll be just as happy as he is in the summer.
Amazing, Rabbi. It's like the famous saying of the Chafetz Chaim, that a person wanted to change the world. He realized he couldn't do this, so he said, I'll change my country. He couldn't do it. He changed my city. He couldn't do it. I'll change my family. He couldn't do it. So he said, I'll change myself. But once he changed himself, then his family, his city, his country, and the world was changed as well.
Exactly.
So you start with yourself, and slowly but surely, it will spread the light. So Rabbi, we know that one of the foundational mitzvot is to love your fellows, you love yourself. If we find our fellow friend or neighbor who is in the darkness and isn't, as they say, in the best mood, what's the best advice for this situation? So it could be like the Rabbi just said, to throw a compliment, to give him a little bit of chizuk. And we know that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. How do we prevent our fellow relatives and friends from falling into the tendency of getting down and being in a sad mood to hopefully avoid the problem in the first place, not for them to get there in the first place?
Oh, wonderful. You should know, Rabbi Yaakov, there's an incredible Ramban. There's an amazing Ramban. There's a misconception that, people learn the pasuk, a person should love his fellow friend like himself. And, a person could ask the question, how's that possible? It's the Metzias is otherwise. It's a Metzias of a person that he loves himself the most, more than anybody else. The Ramban really even poses the question, how could there be a mitzvah, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha? And even more so, we find in the Talmud and in many other sources, which indicates and implies otherwise. The Gemara Bab Metzia says, the famous case, we have two people walking in the desert, there's one flask of water. So Rabbi Kiva says, there's only one flask of water, you're supposed to drink it yourself. What does Rabbi Kiva mean? What happened to the it's very interesting in Spain, during the times of the Ritvaz, unfortunately, they were also subjected to tremendous oppression. There was terrible anti-Semitism that was taking place. And there were two very good friends, two childhood friends. They were best friends. And unfortunately, one of them were arrested. And it was a libel. It wasn't true. It was a false accusation that they arrested him for stealing. And in Spain, at that point in time, if somebody was found guilty, they would cut off his arm. And the person knew he was innocent. He was 100% innocent. He was totally motivated by anti-Semitism. And luckily, a miracle happened. And after he was arrested, he was able to escape. And he fled to a different country, which is a story on its own, but we don't have time for that. It's beyond the scope of the time that we have. So the government, the police government, was so agitated on what happened. So they ended up arresting his best friend. And they placed out an announcement, and they spread out a declaration that if the person that escaped comes back, then fine, we'll let your best friend go free. But if you don't come back, not only are we going to chop off your friend's arm, we're going to kill him.
Wow.
So he had a shiloh what to do. What does he do? Is he mechuyev to go back because his best friend's life is at risk? So they send this shiloh to the Ritvaz. And they wanted to ask him his opinion. And the Ritvaz penned a tshuva. It's a famous tshuva to Ritvaz, where the Ritvaz writes back that he's not mechuyev to go back, to have his arm chopped off to save his friend. Why? Because chayecha koidma. So this makes the kash even bigger. What happened to v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha? And here we see that it's even taken in the psak halacha. Halacha l'maaseh, Ritvaz says a person is not mechuyev to go back. So how do we understand the whole halacha of v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha? Says the Ramban an incredible insight. You know what the Ramban says? The Ramban writes, he says, you know what v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha means? It doesn't mean that I need to love my friend as much as I love myself, because that's impossible. It's against the teva, the nature, the way the Rebbeinu Shalom created us. But rather, says the Ramban, what the pasuk is teaching us is v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. What each and every individual wants for himself, the shidduch that he wants for himself, the wealth, the nachas, the hatzlacha, the way he desires his life to run. It should be a life of shalom, of ava, of yachva, of serenity, of peace, of tranquility. The same way what you want for yourself, you should want that for the other person as well. I want to share with you the Panovich Rav. He was a phenomenal fundraiser. Phenomenal, one of the best fundraisers I think Klal Yisrael had. They say over a famous, cute anecdote. He was once fundraising, and they told him, if you go to this person, you're wasting your time. You're not going to get anything. He wasn't such a religious person, so you're wasting your time. Don't even bother. The Panovich Rav says, no, I want to go to him. The Panovich Rav came to him, he spoke to him, and this affluent, wealthy individual told the Panovich Rav, he says, listen, I'll make a deal with you. I'll cover the whole budget of the school. I'll put up the building on one condition. None of the boys could wear kippahs. They can't wear yarmulkes. So the Panovich Rav told him, fine, we have a deal. He walked out of the house and he opened up a girls' school. So when the Panovich Rav came to America to collect, his only child gave birth a couple of weeks early, and he was stuck here in America. And it's not like today you can get on a red-eye flight. He wasn't able to get a ticket so fast, so he ended up missing the bris. Mm. Before he came back, the Chazon Ish instructed his children to go back to the hospital and put the baby back in the hospital bed. It's like this when he comes back, that simcha, that joy that a zayda, that a grandparent has when the first grandchild is born, he'll be able to experience that and not feel that it was taken away from him and the entire simcha happened without him. You know what's so great about the story? The Chazon Ish never had children.
Oh, wow.
But yet, he was so sensitive to the needs of others, he was able to tap in. What's the need? What's the tzarech? What would I want in such a situation? What does the other person need? What's he missing? And he was able to be yored l'soif daite shel adam. And he was such a gadol in that aspect that ad kedei kach, don't take away that simcha that he could have experienced. And that's, I believe, the answer to the question here. You see somebody else is down. You have to be, a person should be yored l'soif daite shel adam. What are they missing? What makes them tick? What excites them? What could I do for them that will put them back on the map to make them happy? Whether it's going out together, whether it's spending time, if it's someone who wants to be able to learn with them, to schmooze with them, to be yored l'soif daite shel adam, to be sensitive to their needs. And when a person is sensitive to another person's needs, you could change his life. There's so many stories. I mean, we ourselves, just from being in chinuch and being at this role, we could tell you of stories of what it meant a good word to somebody, what a compliment could do, what it means to make a seder with a person, to go out with them. If it's something they like to play a sport game or like they want to go out to eat for a coffee together, whatever the person needs. It could be a vast difference of people, what they need, what they're yearning, and how they have to be nourished. If a person is yerdus of daite shel adam, one person, like you said, he could change. It could be a whole different dynamics of the person's life to change.
Amazing, Rabbi Goldstein. What chizuk, what inspiration. Very, very, very nice. And maybe we could ask you for one final message, one final thought for our broad audience about these points, about lighting up the night, we'll say.
So I'll tell you, I want to leave with a message that I believe is emes lamita. You know, we all know the story with Yosef and the tremendous nisayon that he was able to pass, that the Rambam titles and the Rambam list examples of how would you describe the epitome? What's the pinnacle of a heichi dami kiddush Hashem? How do we describe someone who's mekadosh Shem Shemayim? So you would think the Rambam would list maybe Avram Avinu was thrown into the kivshan eish, people who are mois nefesh, who give up their lives for Hashem. That's not what the Rambam writes. The Rambam writes that the epitome, the top of the totem pole, the greatest example, the primary example of someone who's mekadosh Shem Shemayim was Yosef HaTzadik with the nisayon of Eshes Paitifa, where she tried to entice him and lure him into Chet. And Yosef being all alone and being able to withstand such a test, that's the epitome of what a Kiddush Hashem is. But you know what's interesting? The introduction that the Torah gives to such a story, to the episode of Yosef, it says, Vayi kayom hazeh, it was a regular day, Vayave Yosef habayso lasos malachtoi. Yosef came to do his work. We know Yosef was the manager. He was the CEO of the business. He ran everything. And the pasuk describes the introduction to the story. He came to do his work. So Gemara and Saita wonders, what does it mean, lasis malachti? He came to do his work. One opinion is that he had a mind to do the sin. He had the machshava. He had the intent. Baruch Hashem, he was saved, but his machshava was to do the averu. Another opinion is, no. What does it mean he came to do the work? It means the malacha mamish. It was a regular day, and he had a mind to come to do his daily work, whatever he was supposed to do, whatever job he had to do. It was a regular day, and he had a mind to perform and to do the work that he was supposed to do. I beg the question: if you learn like the opinion that he had a mind to do the avera, I understand that this is the introduction to the episode of Yosef. We want to tell you that although he had the machshava, Baruch Hashem, he was able to withstand the great nisayon. As difficult as it was, that even he had the machshava to do it. But if you learn that lasis malachta means that it was a regular day, he came to work, why is that necessary? Why is that the preface of this story? What do I need to know that for? You know, there's a Gemara in Avodah Zarah. There are three similar Gemaras. But the Gemara tells us about a person that did a courageous and bold act. And in all three similar stories, the Gemara concludes with the words of Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the editor of our Mishnayos. The Gemara concludes all these stories and says, V'al zeh bacha Rebbe. On all these three instances, Rebbe had an epiphany and he began to cry. And he said, Yesh kainai lama b'sha'achas. There are those who are meritorious that are able to merit to acquire a portion of the world to come on the turn of a dime in one instant. On this Rebbe cried. And I ask you, what was Rebbe crying about? You mean he was disappointed and agitated that what took me a lifetime, this other person was able to accomplish on the turn of a dime? Says Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, that's not the meaning of the Gemara. You know what Rebbe is teaching us? What Rebbe is telling us is that Rebbe realized of what a moment of inspiration of what it can accomplish. What a person could accomplish in one instant, in one moment. The Alzeh Bacher Rebbe, and Rebbe cried because he said to himself, who knows how many times in my life I let those moments pass. Comes the Pasuk, and the Pasuk says, Vayavoy Yosef Haboisa Lasis Malachta. It was a regular day. And he was faced with something that changed the entire landscape. It changed his destiny. He became the Yosef HaTzadik. The Lechat Shava writes, if he never would have withstood this Nisayon, the whole world would have crumbled and been destroyed. Here was a regular day, a regular moment. And Yosef was given the opportunity to be faced with a Nisayon that changed everything. It elevated him from Yosef to become Yosef HaTzadik. He's the one that represents Klal Yisrael. Yosef is the same numerical value as Melech Yavan. He's the same gematria as Antiochus, living in the choshech, living amidst the darkness, like we are living today, the influence of the darkness of the outside world. But Yosef embedded within us every single year this koyach. It wasn't Yom Kippur, it wasn't Ne'ilah, it wasn't that grand, great moment. It was a regular day. And that's the message that we in our days, it could be a regular day. Person's faced with a Nisayon, he thinks, oh, I accomplished an Nisayon, I faulted an Nisayon. It's not going to make a difference. What dent is going to make? Is it going to make? So the Pasuk, no. Every single person, don't minimize any act, any Nisayon. You know why? Because you're rewriting the books of history. By Yavoy, Yosef, Lasis, Habaisa, Vahi Kayoy Mazeh, it was a regular day. He was planning on going to work. And yet he was faced with Nisayon. And Yosef probably thought to himself, what's the difference if I do it? I don't. Who's going to know anyway? It's before Matan Torah. He could have had myriads and myriads of excuses, but yet he withstood the Nisayon, and look what he accomplished. His entire destiny changed. He was on the Choshen. That's what the message is. We in our lives, every single moment, don't turn it away. Alzeh Bacher Rebbe cried because look what a moment of inspiration could accomplish. That's the message that we have to take out. You know, Rav Schwab once spent a Shabbos at a Chavetz Chaim in Radin, Shimon Schwab. And he said over many times, you know, his experience, you can imagine how he felt to be by the Chavetz Chaim for a Shabbos. And one of the things he mentioned, he said over, is that when he came to the Chavetz Chaim asked him, are you a Kohen? So he told him no. So the Chavetz Chaim said, you should know I'm a Kohen. He says, you know why? Because my great-great-great-great-grandfather, when Moshe Rabbeinu, after the Chet Egel, made the calling, Mila Hashem Elai, my great-great-grandfather stepped forward. And from that one act, it changed the entire dynamics forever and ever, that his children will be serving, not in a regular place, but doing the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, being makav the Kabbanos, spending time in the holiest place. Why? Because of one act that my great-great-grandfather did. That's the message. We have to ignite our Pach Shemen. Everybody has tremendous koiches. We live in a world today that our mitzvahs have so much more value than the previous generations. We realize the Pach that's invested within us, with the choshech, with the nisyonos, but we realize what we could accomplish. I think that's the greatest chizuk, and that's the greatest message that we could walk away from Chanukah. And it should be a schus. And we should be zeicha to the true light, the true aragonis, the light of the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, the Meir of Yameinu. Amen.
Amen. Wow, Rabbi Boruch Goldstein, what chizuk, what inspiration, the power of the moment, how a person within a moment can really, really be inspired or to change or to do more. Rabbi Goldstein, want to thank you for your inspiration, for your chizuk. I want to thank you for all that you do for Klal Yisrael, for the Jewish people, and for everyone. And let's take these messages to heart. And like the Rabbi said, let's Bezat Hashem bring the Geula, and we'll see the Geula Shema, the complete redemption, speeding in our days.